Welcome in, everybody, to Grind Time, powered by Full Time Fantasy and the FFWC. I am your host, Billy Muzio. With me, a special guest, Jeff Ratcliffe. He's the president of FTN Network. He's an award-winning Sirius XM host with the Jeff Ratcliffe Show. He's the 2021 most accurate expert at the Fantasy Pros weekly contest. He also is on TV at CBS Sports. Jeff, pleasure to have you on. I've really enjoyed our conversations where we've got to know each other at the FSGA as well as the Expo. It's nice to finally record with you.
Yeah, man, we had a good time out there at the Expo. It's still shocking to me. Anybody who hasn't gone is considering going. It's worth it. But it was shocking in that those two drafts of ours, which watching a fantasy football draft is like watching paint dry. But we had Billy, there was like 3 deep behind us, like just watching us draft. It was unreal. It definitely was unreal, surreal a little bit as well. Never thought we would get to this point, but I'm glad we're here. And yeah, thoroughly enjoyed having a couple beers with you as well there.
Yeah, so this week I actually made a trade in that with in that league. I needed a tight end badly. I was streaming like Kate Otten one week, not the week he scored touchdowns, of course. It was, Logan Thomas the next week, who still has 0 points since I've started him. And so finally went out and made a trade because I realized I have 3 Washington Commanders, and this is never a good thing. So I need to get rid of one. And I traded away Curtis Samuel yesterday for Zach Ertz. Good move for my team, I think, overall. Yeah. It also gives me a solid tight end. I'm also hoping for Chase Claypool to take on his role and kind of develop into that role here with Chicago. It was promising to see his target share in week 1 of the team, and so hoping that he can step into that role and fill the flex spot.
Yeah, I think we're turning in the right direction. 6 targets on limited routes is very good. I'm not worried about what he put in the box score. I'm more worried about that target share, and that's nice. Big body target for Justin Fields.
That's right. Well, let's start off at the running back position for some Week 10 discussion. Last week, Joe Mixon erupted for 55.1 fantasy points in Week 9. Can he be trusted as an RB1 moving forward? He's only finished inside the top 12 3 times all season prior to that.
Well, I think the key with Joe Mixon is just straight up volume. Still number 3 in the league in volume. Only Derrick Henry and Saquon Barkley with more touches than him. And it's funny, heading into last week, I'm like, well, he isn't efficient, but you play him anyway because of the volume. And then he has one of the most hyper-efficient games that we've seen all season and maybe in several years at the position. But yeah, in that explosive offense, we just stay the course. RB1, one of the things, like you can't set your watch to efficiency outside of maybe Travis Etienne right now, but you can set your watch to volume for particular players. And Joe Mixon is seeing that workload.
So undoubtedly, I moved Joe Mixon down 3 spots in my rankings before kickoff that day because I was looking at the matchup as didn't like the match, didn't like how everything was supposed to play out in my head. He scored 4 times more points, or to say, he scored more than 4 times the previous weeks combined last week in his matchup. So huge boost in the overall running back standings for Joe Mixon in fantasy this week. It was a game that will go down probably as one of the greatest running back games in the league this year. Excited for him, but was not excited for my rankings. ETN season is officially upon us. He's a top 5 back moving forward, do you think?
Borderline.
Okay.
Well, especially once we get outside of the buys. He's right there. I'm curious if this volume is going to continue. Since James Robinson's out of the mix, 20-plus carries both of those games, which obviously is a good thing. The efficiency has been off the charts. And by the way, like there's no narrative to this whatsoever, but in my mind, this game just makes sense because he's Jamal Charles 2.0 and he gets to face the Kansas City Chiefs this week. I want to see the volume continue, though. That's the number one thing. Now, the offense does seem to be flowing through him. And by the way, if this was a whole ploy by Doug Peterson earlier in the season to market James Robinson, like kudos, Doug Peterson. Nicely done because it worked really well. And now here you got your guy. He's right there, though. More importantly, top 10 rest of the season? Yes, top 10 for ETN.
Now, do you think that was the actual plan all along, or do you think it was ETN dropped 2 touchdowns week 1 by the end zone, and you know what, we're just going to bench him because we're mad at him, and we're going to throw in James Robinson, and oh, wow, he did well. We can get some value out of him now.
We like to assume rational coaching. We love to assume that this is a chess match for a lot of these guys, but it's not. I don't know if it was. Fortunately, what they saw out of him, I mean, the writing was on the wall that it was going to be ETN regardless of James Robinson's status with the team anyway, because the efficiency was just insane. And he was giving him something that Robinson couldn't do. Like Robinson was getting stuff behind the line of scrimmage way too often, could not rip off longer runs.
Yep.
And now you don't have that problem anymore.
That's the key, the long run. So he is 5th in the league right now, ETN, not James Robinson. ETN is 5th in the league in breakaway runs, 9.2%. He has the 3rd most breakaway runs, 5th in the league in yards per touch, 3rd in the league in yards per reception, 5th in the league in red zone touches. You hit the hammer on the nail. The efficiency is here. ETN season is upon us. I am glad that I have to weigh up my rankings and pre-draft rankings because at first I was looking a little worried. Happy it's kind of settling in and talent eventually wins. Talk about talent. D'Onta Foreman appears to be very talented now. He's a couple years removed from his Achilles injury. Is kind of the back that we thought he was going to be coming out of college when he was on Houston. He continues to get it done. I mean, last night he ran for 31 attempts, 130 yards, and another score. He is running back 10 in PPR leagues for week 7 through 10. And since Christian McCaffrey's been traded away, including last night, from week 7 on, he's rushed for 389 yards and 4 scores. Is Foreman the real deal? Do we dare say he's fringe running back 1 moving forward?
It's tricky because the Chuba Hubbard element to this, right? He was practicing in full, but he was still listed as questionable. And that was a little bit odd to me. That practice pattern didn't fit the designation. So there maybe still was something lingering there. We know he wasn't used much and Blackshear was more effective than him. But does that change going forward? Because remember when McCaffrey was traded away, it was Chuba Hubbard first and foremost as the lead. And then it was going to be a timeshare regardless. But does that come back into play? Now, to be fair with Foreman, I always wonder what could have been, because he had a breakout game with the Houston Texans and ruptured his Achilles in that game. Had 2 touchdowns in that game, ruptured his Achilles. This is a former 2,000-yard rusher at the college level. This is a guy who stepped in admirably for Derrick Henry last year and showed he can handle a 20-plus carry workload. So it does make a lot of sense. I love this in the Kings Classic League. I drafted McCaffrey. I drafted Foreman to cuff him, and this situation couldn't have worked out better because you get the McCaffrey in the perfect offense for his skill set, and now Foreman showing up here. I think it's pushing it to say, fringe RB1, but the world needs RB2s as well, Billy, and I'm okay with that. Like top 20 guy going forward, the offense could be a little bit rocky, but believe it or not, they're in the playoff hunt in that division that nobody wants to win, apparently. That was a huge win for him last night, and he's a big part of it, so I can't see them going away from it.
Yeah, they seem to be taking the Atlanta approach, and as long as we don't throw the ball, we're safe. Let's just run the ball as much as we can and get some breakaway runs. Let's take a look at our starts of the week. So who are you higher on this week at the running back position versus ECR?
Well, I think we're going to have to point to a little bit of moving pieces with an injury situation and game script, and I'm going to go with Antonio Gibson here for Monday night. J.D. McKissick didn't play last week. He's dealing with a neck injury, already did not practice. I don't have a Friday practice report in front of me right now, but did not practice the first practice of the week. If he doesn't go, and this goes to script where the Eagles get out to a big lead early, playing from behind, that's not Brian Robinson territory. That's Antonio Gibson territory. And what I really like, Robinson has enabled Washington to use Gibson the way he was used in college. He was not a running back in college. He could carry the ball, but he was a tweener at Memphis. Now they're using him that way, and all of a sudden, wow, he's scoring touchdowns as a receiver. Now, I know last week wasn't that good, but I'll take the 2 weeks before that as well. I can't just look just to last week and say the guy sucks. So I'm going to probably be a little bit higher on him. I like this spot for him against the Eagles on Monday night.
Yeah, Gibson, one of the just one of those combine warriors, metrics off the chart.
Yeah.
So glad to see he's finally being utilized with his skill set. I've always said they just needed to trade him to a team that was going to use him properly. Happy to see them. I don't think they've fully got to the point where they're using him properly, but they're heading in the right direction. Yeah. So it's happy to see that. I remember where the year ago, he was being drafted as the top 3-4 rounds, right? And so it's nice to see his skill set start to be unleashed. Although I still feel like they have a lot more room to go. But I'm very happy you said that because I almost picked his name as well. Mine is going to be Jeff Wilson. So ECR's running back 27. He's probably going to finish inside the top 20 for me. Week 9, running back 8 in PPR. Familiar, with the McDaniels offense as well already. I've talked about this in the pod for the last couple weeks. He gets to face the Browns this week, which are the 5th worst at the running back position. They've allowed 820 yards and 10 scores on the ground, another 255 and 2 in the air. And he, of course, we all know that Wilson's forte is breakaway runs. He's 6th in the league in breakaway runs. And last week, I was not surprised by this either because, again, the familiarity with the offense. He outsnapped Mostert 49.1 to 47.4 in his first start as a Dolphin. So I think that would probably be the trend we're going to see going forward, a heavier side of closer to 50-50 for Wilson, probably maybe 55-45 split to keep Raheem Mostert healthy because he's a glass house, in my opinion. So I'm excited to see Jeff Wilson in this offense and back with familiar faces.
Not a picture of health himself. Has been known to get banged up a little bit too, but it's probably the perfect situation then to have both of those guys back there. And the number one thing, you nail it, the familiarity with the offense. He knows this outside zone run system that they have. He was able to step right in. There was no ramping up like we saw with McCaffrey or like we're seeing with Nyheim Hines in Buffalo. It was, here you go, kid. Here's 27 snaps. Let's see what you can do. Now, the one thing, Billy, I will warn people against, though, is I'm getting Denver 2021 vibes. Like if we're literally close to a 50-50 split, it's going to come down to who scores the touchdown.
Yep.
And last week it was Wilson. Maybe it is again this week. I mean, hey, they could both score a touchdown in this game. This is set up that way. But just be careful out there if you're, very bullish on Wilson and then very down on Mostert. I think we're probably a little bit, closer. Yeah, exactly. The scales are a lot closer than people realize. But I love that he now has this second opportunity because he was playing well for the 49ers before McCaffrey came in.
Yeah, very well. Over under between the two of them. Are we gonna get 8 games out of them?
Hey, I always say I'm only going to take a bet if the bet is there, and I don't know if that bet's there. I don't even want to play it. That's dangerous.
All right, fair enough.
Very dangerous.
A bet I did make the beginning of the year was Alan Lazard, and it was against a fellow friend of mine in the community, and the line was set at wide receiver 52 or higher, and I took Alan Lazard higher in that bet. Right now, he is wide receiver 19 weeks 2 through 9. He missed week 8. That's just a side note. He's still in the top 20. 5th in deep targets. He's 11th in the red zone targets, 8th in touchdowns, 20th in air yards, 14th in ADOT, 14th in fantasy points per game. Now, none of this is something that's just, blowing your mind, but where you were able to get him in drafts and where he is now in fantasy points, we knew that the Packers had trust issues with rookies and underdeveloped wide receivers. Did you think all along that Lazard was going to be a wide receiver 2 or even maybe a high-end wide receiver 3 in this offense, knowing that we had a lot of unvacated targets with Devontae Adams leaving?
Yeah, it was more of a high-end wide receiver 3 for me.
Yep.
The key, Aaron Rodgers didn't participate in the offseason, and Aaron Rodgers is one of those guys, and we've seen this in the past, like Devontae Adams, how it ended with Green Bay, he was phenomenal. He was the best receiver in the league, best route runner, everything. You checked every single box with him. In the beginning of his career with the Packers, it was ugly. We had people saying he's a bust. He put up all these huge numbers in college. He sucked, blah, blah, blah. No, he wasn't on the same page with Rodgers. Rodgers has this. He had it with Jordy Nelson, briefly with James Jones. He had it with Greg Jennings, who put a team on a back. Greg Jennings. Beast. These guys know when Rodgers gives you a look what it means. Romeo Doubs, Christian Watson, heck, even Sammy Watkins. Like, these guys don't have that, whereas Alan Lazard has been with Rodgers. Lazard unheralded. Amazingly enough, that draft class where they drafted 3 receivers, we're talking Jamon Moore, Equanimous St. Brown. Those guys, Lazard is the last man standing, and he wasn't even drafted. He was an undrafted rookie free agent out of Iowa State that year, and now here he is. He's not a phenomenal player. He's not. But he is a good player, and sometimes that's all you need. So I love this now, especially now with Romeo Doubs banged up and going to miss time, with Christian Watson seemingly unable to stay on the field and do anything when he's on the field, with the lackluster tight end situation, with basically you're riding your running backs and that's it. It's a good spot for Lazard.
And speaking of the running back position, Aaron Jones a little banged up this week as well, so we might see a little bit more usage in the passing game from Lazard this week more than ever. Moving on to CeeDee Lamb, wide receiver 10 year-to-date, despite not having a 100-yard game since October 31st, 2021. That stat just boggled my mind when I saw that. Is he still a wide receiver one the rest of the season? Volume dependent, I'm assuming.
Well, he is, and I think part of this really does just revolve around Dak Prescott. It's weird, we didn't have Dak Prescott for most of the season, but when he finally gets out there before the bye, I don't know if you saw this, but for me, it was the first time he looked like pre-injury Dak Prescott. He was moving. He was running with confidence. He scored a rushing touchdown. And we're seeing this with other quarterbacks. Like, for example, I don't think this is a fluke that Justin Fields all of a sudden is throwing some touchdown passes now that he's running this way, because the running is his comfort zone. Yep. You get a quarterback comfortable, they're going to start making plays. Dak Prescott, that is an element to his game. He's not Justin Fields. He's not Jalen Hurts, but he's a decent mobile quarterback, no doubt about it. Also, I love that for his floor for fantasy purposes, but I think that's going to help CeeDee Lamb. CeeDee Lamb runs predominantly out of the slot, which is always going to cap your ceiling a little bit. Like, you're not going to see massive yardage games necessarily out of him most weeks, but the volume, as you said, volume dependent, I think is a great way to put it. Also, this week on the perimeter, I don't want to be on the perimeter against Jair Alexander. I don't want to be Michael Gallup out there. I want to be CeeDee Lamb in the slot in this matchup.
Yeah, the only person who seems to be able to just burn Jair Alexander is going to be Justin Jefferson, like he did week 1.
Terry McLaurin did.
Terry McLaurin
in shadow coverage. Terry mixed scoring. As soon as you get Taylor Heineke out there, that's the ball game.
Scary Terry out there just burning Jair Alexander. CeeDee Lamb right now is the only two top 10 performances all year, weeks 4 and 5. He's 9th though in the league in targets at 73, 3rd in target share, 31.6%. There's the volume we talked about. 15th in air yards, 9th in yards per route run. I want to play a little game. Who would he be if he only had 21% target share?
Oh, man. 21% target share. Who would he be? Wow. I'm looking through the list right now, see if I can come up with somebody. Is it like Zay Jones or something?
I was gonna say.
Is it Zay Jones? I don't know.
I'll take the answer. I like it.
That's really bad. Not to knock Zay Jones, but that moves us pretty far down the list, because you're right though. You chop 10% off or 9%, that adds up. And if you're not averaging 17, 18, 19 yards per catch,
yep. Now you're Zay Jones.
Now you're Zay Jones. Wow. Somebody should make that on a t-shirt. Now you're Zay Jones.
There you go.
We'll know what it means.
It's copyrighted. We're done. Stephon Diggs, wide receiver 2 in my preliminary pre-draft rankings, I should say. Right now, year-to-date, wide receiver 3, despite the bye. 5th in targets with 82. 10th in target share, 28.9. 4th in air yards, 951. 3rd in red zone targets, 13. 3rd in receiving yards, 857. 3rd in receptions, 60. 2nd in fantasy points per game. 1st in touchdowns. 2nd in yards per route run. You don't need me to tell you that Stephon Diggs is good, but the question is, if Josh Allen does not play this week, how far will he be down in your rankings, and how will he fare in the matchup?
Well, he'll still be a wide receiver 1, so he'll be a top 12. He'll be a top 10. Let's put it that way. The range of outcomes, I think, is the more important thing that we have to be considering here, because even with Case Keenum, or as one of my callers long ago called him, Casey Kasem under center, you could still have a top 5 week out of Stephon Diggs, especially when he's facing the team that he's facing. Because we know that's not that. Some revenge games are a bunch of crap. That's why I make fun of it all the time. But there are some players who dislike their former teams, and I suspect there might be some of that going on here. But regardless, the range of outcomes. Could he have a top 5 week? Sure. Could he have wide receiver 35 numbers this week? Sure. The likelihood of that happening with Josh Allen under center is much, 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 much lower. So I think that's what we have to factor in. And one of the most important things that I try to tell as many fantasy players out there as possible, make sure your expectations are reasonable. We are not playing Madden. This is real football, and things are going to happen. And as long as we're prepared and we understand the context for why those things happen, we don't have to run around, this guy sucks, he killed my fantasy team. No, Casey Kasem's under center for you. Case Keenum's under center. That's the problem. I think bigger impact here, though, not Diggs, is Gabe Davis, because he's
yes.
already working on limited volume as it is. He's already such big play dependent as it is, and I don't think Keenum can deliver that for him.
So Keenum's career completion percentage, 57.3%. He has a 1.6 touchdown to INT ratio. So serviceable. I wouldn't say accurate, but is this going to benefit maybe the tight end position? Maybe the running backs a little bit more in the flats and in short game?
Potentially. I almost said Devin Singletary as the guy who I might be a little bit higher on. And I also wanted to highlight, like, this could be the last week where we can use him as an RB2, because Hines is only going to get more involved. And James Cook isn't going anywhere. Yeah. Now, he's not playing 40 snaps a game. You're going to see a dozen, maybe upwards of close to 20 out of him. But he's not going anywhere. He's going to eventually eat into it. So, yeah, I think they're more so than, say, Dawson Knox. I mean, Dawson Knox, it's like you have to score a touchdown in order for him to reach value. Otherwise, you're going to be maddeningly frustrated by his 3 for 32 stat line.
Yeah, Dawson Knox, one of the highest touchdown rates last year, which was unsustainable. We talked about it all offseason. He was my bust at tight end pick this year, and it's looking like it's materializing, but you cannot have or rely on a fantasy player that is that dependent upon touchdowns when it's one of the most fluky stat measures that we can measure in the game. Speaking of tight end, let's just move along. Let's move on to the only ones that we've been able to trust. Kelsey, Ertz, Goddard, a healthy Andrews. Is there anyone outside of this list that you trust on a week-to-week basis?
Now I do. TJ Hawkinson. I mean, this wasn't a fluke. They bring him in. They immediately get him rolling. 9 targets in that game. The challenge that we had for Kirk Cousins is we have an all-world top target, right? Justin Jefferson, every team in the league would be fighting over each other to get him, right? After that, you have an aging Adam Thielen, who essentially now produces like a tight end, by the way. He's touchdown dependent, not going to see major volume, and also is a little banged up and north of 30. So you get in TJ Hawkinson, it's huge. And now I do think we're going to see consistent volume there and consistent top 5 production out of him down the stretch.
I agree. I did have him down in rankings last week. I was thinking there's no way he's going to see the field as much as he did. He saw 90.9% of snaps in week 9. I saw the report prior to kickoff, and I think the night before, where they said that he was staying extra hours to learn the playbook and get up to speed. I was thinking, yeah, everyone says that. No one actually is able to get in the field and play a majority of snaps. Well, TJ Hawkinson just happens to be that guy. And I think it's because he is the Vikings mascot himself. He already knew that he already knew the playbook. He probably had it memorized. He probably wrote it. And there he is, 90.9% of snaps, 9 for 970 yards, like you said. I think he's – now, this is where I'm going back and forth. Do you have him in that tier with, let's say – I think Kelsey and the healthy Andrews are in their own tier. Yeah. But now that next tier, that Ertz, Goddard, Hawkinson in that tier?
I mean, I had them, like, there all along.
Is he number 1 in that tier then?
Goddard probably still stays there for now. Ertz is close. The challenge with Ertz, obviously, is a catch and fall down guy. So if he scores a touchdown, gets some decent volume, I mean, we're going to love it. The floor is hot, maybe highest with him out of those guys. But we've seen already with Hawkinson, multiple big plays. Like, he's got that, like, little bit of Travis Kelce or George Kittle to him that he's not going to catch and fall down. Goddard is the constant mismatch, though, in that offense. It's tough. I know the touchdown productivity hasn't been there what people were hoping for, but I'll take that and toss it aside. When you have the volume, when you have the yardage production that you have with him, he'll come out just slightly ahead.
Cole Kmet finished as tight end 2 in PPR leagues. This one has been maddening because I had him high in my pre-draft rankings. Can we trust him now? This offense seems to be clicking. Do you trust Cole Kmet?
There's not many tight ends I trust.
Yeah, that's so true.
Not many. I've talked about the tight end merry-go-round, and I did this bit way back in week 1, and I said, all right, with David Njoku, we're going to drop him for Evan Ingram. I'm going to drop Evan Ingram the next week for Pat Freiermuth. We'll drop Pat Freiermuth after that for David Njoku again. And then, and it's, never ending. Cole Kmet is part of that. And the challenge that we run into with tight end is that we're always going to chase last week's fantasy points. Instead of looking at fantasy points, though, because at tight end it's so heavily impacted by touchdowns, look to the volume. Now, the volume at least is encouraging. It was 6 targets in that game. But I just can't see how, especially if Claypool gets ramped up even more, how a team that throws the ball 25 times a game is going to give you enough volume to sustain consistent production for Cole Kmet. So I can't trust him. No, but trust is very tough for most of these tight ends, just the nature of the position and the way we score it for fantasy.
Yeah. The volume is there. The snaps are there. 92.8% on the season. That's not the week. That's the season. So he is on the field. Yes, he's blocking as well, but 3 touchdowns in the last 3 weeks. Top 14 finish in back-to-back weeks. He's ran 149 routes. That's not a lot. 17.4% target share, kind of mediocre. He only has 200 yards. 26 targets on the year. It's hard to trust those type of numbers, but like you said, the tight end landscape as a whole in general has been very hard to trust. And so anytime you see someone on the field that much, I'm probably just going to start plugging them in my lineups until I'm proven wrong otherwise. Foster Moreau or Foster no?
No, I don't mind it. Last week didn't work out that well for people who used him, but 42 yards on 2 catches. He's smooth, man. He's very athletic. The week before that, he did have the 9 targets, so I don't mind it, especially now you got Renfro out of the mix as well. So it's not just Darren Waller, and you have to make up for those targets. And Mac Hollins, I love, like, as soon as that news happened, it's like 25 questions about Mac Hollins immediately. All right, I'll flex him out, but my expectations are low for him. This offense is really going to run primarily still through Devontae Adams and Josh Jacobs, but Moreau would be, I think, very much in that mix as possibly the second target. So this could work out really well for him. Actually, I think he's going to be a really interesting play this week.
Yeah, so 13% target share. Again, he has not been the starter all year, but he is, top 30 in routes run, top 25 in route participation. So add in now the snaps that he's going to foresee, and you could easily say top 20, top 18, 16, 17. How high are you going with him?
Borderline top 15. I think I have him at 16 right now. I have him at 16 right now. So, he's pretty close. Of course, rankings, we're still a little ways away from Sunday, so things can move around a little bit here. It's tough, because I look at him and then I look at somebody like Tyler Higbee, who I have, especially if Stafford can't clear protocol, I have no ambition to start Tyler Higbee. So we could see him move down, and then we could see Moreau move up. I won't move Moreau up into the top 12, but he could very well crack the top 15. Yeah,
that's something I always tell people with rankings is that so much can change up to that hour and a half before kickoff.
Yep.
People can move 40, 50 spots in a ranking based upon that inactive news. And so I always tell people, be very cautious of where you're pulling that data from this far in advance to Sunday, because so much can change. You don't want to have it written in stone. That's in pencil. There's a lot of erasers sitting around, and we got to be able to come back to it and make those final adjustments on Sunday morning.
And really tinkering with your lineup 1,000 times before, it doesn't do you any good. I always say that with fantasy lineups, we want as few decisions as possible, because if you're anything like me, the more decisions you have to make, the greater chance you're going to make bad decisions. Right? It's just going to happen. It's the nature of the beast. And when we sit there and we fixate on our lineup throughout the course of the week, we're creating more decisions for ourselves, as opposed to, I like to set it at the beginning of the week, Thursday Night Football, come around right before that thing, and then set it, make sure nobody's in the flex spot, and I'm all clear on injuries. I don't look again, Billy, until Sunday. I can't do anything to change it. Obviously, I'll know if I have a player who all of a sudden is out and I got to hit waivers real quick, or I do that. But I'm not tinkering with the starting lineup 1,000 times, because it doesn't do any good.
No, 100% agree with you. I'm a volume drafter, a volume player at FFWC, and I have a trick I go through. There's a button called Set All Lineups. You click on the Set All Lineups, and then I just hit Control and F, and I type in THU, Thursday. And I just look at all the people I have that are going to be playing on Thursday and make that start sit based upon Thursday. I don't look at it again until Saturday night, and usually until I have the Shefty bombs come out at midnight, right? And and I start looking at all that and then making my last kind of lineup calls, and then I'll come back to it on Sunday morning with any inactives, surprise inactives, or something that maybe we didn't foresee happening, or news that we wanted to watch, and then make those final adjustments. But
See, I can't do
completely agree
that.
with you.
I got to go to bed at 8:00 on Saturday nights because I'm going to be up at like 4 a.m. to get up to New York. But I do see it all at like 4 a.m. So there's that. But I can never stay up till midnight on a Saturday night for all the great Schefter and Rappaport news that comes out.
Yeah, luckily I'm West Coast, so I get not as late for me. You know, it's 9 o'clock over here. I do a pod right as it comes out, so that way we get all the up to date information. Do a bunch of start sit questions, and I get to dominate the midnight space with the beer. Greg Dulcich right now is going to be my start of the week. ECR is tight end 7. He's inside my top 5. Tight end 3 since his NFL debut, week 6 through 8, averaging 12.1 fantasy points per game in PPR. 182-1 so far in that span. It faces off against Tennessee, who is the 3rd worst against the tight end position. They've allowed 559 yards and 4 scores. 80.3% snaps week 8 before the bye. His usage now is starting to become a little bit more comforting. I am in love with Greg Dulcich.
I mean, the kid is a really solid pass catching. It's surprising that a rookie can do this. He goes out and just looks so smooth right away. And that's really what he is. You know, he was playing in that spread system, Chip Kelly's offense at UCLA, and was used in this way. And fortunately, Denver's not trying to reinvent him. They're just leaning into his skill set the way it is. So I like that one. I actually had Moreau on my list, so we already talked about him. But I do think that ultimately I'll probably be a little bit higher than everybody else on him, just because of how smooth he is and because of the opportunity for targets.
Noted. Quarterback has been inconsistent at best in 2022. It's almost like the tight end junior landscape. But Chicago has seemingly been able to figure out Justin Fields, it seems. Quarterback 1, weeks 5 through 9, averaging 25.9 fantasy points per game. However, during that span, only 851 passing yards. He does have 8 touchdowns, 2 interceptions. This is the kicker: 455 rushing yards and 3 rushing scores. If Josh Allen is out this week, is he your quarterback 2? And second question, where does he fall in your rest of season rankings?
Wow. A couple of great ones right there. All right. So if Josh Allen is out, my quarterback 2 will almost certainly be Patrick Mahomes.
Okay, fair enough.
So it comes down to, is he 3 or 4 for me? And I've been back and forth there with him and Tua, but he's right there. Mm-hmm. And the point is, you pick Justin Fields up most likely after somebody had drafted him and dropped him. So that there's nothing better than that in fantasy football. The play has been, as I said, he looks just so much more comfortable. He's making a couple throws, too, that are very interesting. Like that touchdown throw that wasn't a touchdown throw to Darnell Mooney a couple weeks ago. Fields put that ball in an absolute perfect spot. And that was actually Mooney not running the route right. Like he needed to run that route just a tick deeper. So that way he catches that ball. And even with the defender, he still stays in the end zone. But what are you going to do on that one? Fields is playing out of his mind. He is this year's, what we had last year with Jalen Hurts. He's this year's version of that. He doesn't need to have 40 touchdown passes to be an elite or borderline elite player the rest of the season. Now, I am going to be a tick lower than I am this week on him, but I still think, quarterback 7 is very fair for him going forward. And that just shows you yet again, you do not need to draft a quarterback in round 2, round 3, round 4, round 5, round 6. Heck, even 7, 8, 9. You can draft these quarterbacks late. If they don't pan out, work waivers. And there are guys like this every single year who emerge at the position.
Well, you saw me in the FSGA league. I pushed it to the limit. I took him in. I took my quarterback in like round 14.
In a 14-team league, mind you. Or was that FSGA league was 12-teamer?
Yeah, no, it's 14 teams.
Oh, it is 14 teams as well. That's ballsy.
It is a little ballsy. Unfortunately, that player was Russell Wilson, who was looking really good at the beginning of the year, and now not so much. But I've been playing the waiver wire, just like you said. and have been able to find some fill-ins and have done just okay. I'm not going to say great, but it's been okay at the quarterback position for waiting that long. Josh Allen and Stafford this week are looking doubtful. I would say, even though they say Josh Allen is hour to hour is the new word.
That's a brand new one. Not day to day anymore.
Hour to hour. Aaron Rodgers and Kyler Murray both questionable. I want to get deep here. Can you trust the likes of somebody like Brissett, Davis Mills, Taylor Heineke, Andy Dalton? I see the look of disgust on your face. Case Keenum. Dare I say John Wolford?
Oh man, there's a lot there. there is a lot. I think Brissett's the one who stands out, and
Absolutely.
He's got the mobility. We know that, but it is the matchup. Like for a defense that has this, scary Xavier Howard. Xavier Howard has not performed up to expectation this season. He's allowed, is it 4 touchdowns on the year? I mean, he's getting burnt left and right. We've seen over the course of the season the chemistry develop with Amari Cooper, and then especially over this last month, the chemistry develop as well with Donovan Peoples-Jones. I don't think Njoku's back. I'm not overly concerned there. I think Jacoby Brissett is an interesting one. If you're absolutely desperate, there's a very good chance he's available in one quarterback leagues, even deeper one quarterback leagues, and I think you can get away with using him this week.
Yeah, and they throw the ball so much, hence why I had him at the top of this list. 17th in pass attempts on the year, 255 pass attempts to be exact. They have money throws was the one that I was actually kind of shocked about. Number 4 in money throws, so he can actually been able to put the ball on the spot, which when I saw that I did not immediately think of Jacoby Brissett. And the rest of the metrics are all pretty pedestrian, but serviceable nonetheless. So I would say Jacoby Brissett is one that I've been recommending in Start Sit Questions on our Discord channel. And I am going to say I'd be going to Andy Dalton probably next to that list just because I don't like the matchup for Tyler Heineke against Philly. I just think it's a tough matchup, and I'm not going to be too overly optimistic about the results. But overall, we talked about the inconsistency at the quarterback position. And, I mean, what's the deal? Brady is quarterback 13. Rodgers, quarterback 15. Derek Carr, quarterback 18. Wilson, who I thought was going to be good, quarterback 21. Stafford, 24. Is there hope for these guys the rest of this year? Or are we seeing a change of guard at the quarterback position with the new era of quarterbacks?
Well, that certainly has taken place. We look at who are the standouts now. It's Josh Allen and Patrick Mahomes, or sort of the guys. Of course, Burrow, Justin Herbert, even now Jalen Hurts with this MVP talk. They're all there. They're all well south of 30 years old, and all of the quarterbacks you just mentioned are north of 30 years old, and some of them are north of 45 years old, which is unbelievable. Brady, the problem is touchdown efficiency. Yardage is there, just not converting for touchdowns. Is that an issue of, are they facing coverage that they're – because it's a lot of dink and dunk. I've noticed that with like Chris Godwin, for example. With Rodgers, it's the chemistry with the receivers and the lack of overall talent there. He's still making throws, but you can tell like there was a play with Sammy Watkins at the end of the game last week where Sammy Watkins just literally did not go where Rodgers thought he was going to go. Not on the same page with those guys. I can't explain Derek Carr. That one is baffling to me. Russell Wilson, quarterback in a new offensive scheme who is hurt, typically doesn't bode well. And then Stafford, they have literally nobody to take a top off a defense. No one. And the defenses are just giving them Cooper Kupp. Sure, have Cooper Kupp all day long. Have him as much as you want because we know he's going to be in the short and intermediate, and we know we're going to be able to contain him, keep him in front of us, and you're going to kick a darn field goal. So, yeah, there are some problems with the way the rosters are constructed in some instances. I don't look at any of these guys and see dramatic declining skill with maybe the exception of Wilson, but we don't know how much of that is actually the injury there as well, or injuries, plural, with Wilson this season.
Yeah, it's definitely been a wasteland at the quarterback position of the steady, back-end quarterback ones that we were so used to seeing with upside into the high-end quarterback ones. I know for those who waited, but didn't wait as long as I did at the quarterback position, a lot of these names were their targets that were going somewhere in the realm of like round 9 through round 12. And they have also seemingly found themselves scouring the waiver wire on a week-to-week basis for a fill-in. Who is your quarterback start of the week?
So I originally I did have Brissett as one of the options, but let's go with Daniel Jones as well. So fun to endorse him. But what's fascinating about Daniel Jones is, the productivity is not coming from his arm. He's one of the better running quarterbacks in the NFL. And a stat that kind of astounds me. He has the second most runs of 10-plus yards among quarterbacks. Only Lamar has more. He has 15 of them on the season, Daniel Jones. Justin Fields has 14. Like, that's crazy, first and foremost, but it just shows you what he is capable of doing. And against a Houston run defense that absolutely is atrocious, he should have his room to operate here. We know what the ceiling is with him with his legs. Plus, hopefully, I'm not going to hold my breath on Kenny Golladay being a spark for this team, but getting another body out there isn't going to hurt the cause for him. You got Wandale trending up. You have Slayton, who gives you a deep threat in this offense. And then, of course, Saquon Barkley with everything he can do as a pass catcher could help. I don't think they're going to get the game script that'll favor that, but honestly, he goes out, has 80 rushing yards and a touchdown. He's going to be a pretty good fantasy play just with his legs, much less with whatever he does with his arm.
Yeah, gonna have to get done with his legs is the key. I just don't trust the weapons that he has, and him losing Bellinger was also a big hit as well.
That sucked.
So Hudson's been filling in okay, but it's still not the same caliber of a tight end. So I like the pick. Debated picking him, but I ultimately went with Russell Wilson. ECR quarterback 17 this week might be in my top 12. They're facing the Titans, who give up the 7th most points to the quarterback position. They also give up the 3rd most to the wide receiver position. They also give up the 3rd most to the tight end position. So there's a theme here. They give up a lot of points to these fantasy positions. I'm hoping Russell Wilson is able to capitalize on that. They're coming off the bye week. They've been able to get their shit together. Excuse my language, but it needs to happen, right? They finished week 8 with a win. They went out the door with a win. Yes, it was ugly, but he went 251, 1-1. I'm starting to feel like maybe they're getting some rhythm going. They're going to be able to capitalize off the bye, and we've seen the chemistry start to brew with Dolchich as well as Judy. Sutton's kind of fallen off a cliff, but he still has that big playability. I'm going to say Russell Wilson as my quarterback play of the week, who is further down lists than people are willing to take a gamble on. Maybe
let's ride.
I did miss the quarterback start of the week for receiver. I got very distracted by the Nacho Libre mask in the background. Is that your mask? Do you wear that on weekends?
Just every day. Go to the bus stop wearing that, like Rey Mysterio Jr. Back here. That's that's one of the rankings trophies back there. Now has become the mask trophy. Right there.
So give me your wide receiver start of the week. We'll circle back to receiver, and then we'll call it a day.
You just mentioned it's Jerry Jeudy. I'm with you here. I was encouraged by a few things along the way. It hasn't been a smooth ride for Russell Wilson, but it does also go back to what I was talking about with expectations. The expectations were so lofty coming into the season, and I realized that this passing game has not met those expectations, but we now, 10 weeks into the season, have to adjust our expectations. And now where everybody is so low on him, and by him, I mean Russell Wilson, and correspondingly, therefore, Judy and Cortland Sutton, I think it's a nice, interesting opportunity for us. If you have trade deadlines coming up, there's buy low options. Jerry Jeudy could be one of those guys. And I do like 18 targets over the last 2 games, 13 catches over that span. And most importantly, kind of being used the way he should be used in this offense. So he's my guy. I'll probably be a tick higher than everybody else on him.
I like Judy. I do like Judy a lot. And then mine is going to be Chris Olave this week.
Nice.
And it's not like he's moving up exponentially higher than a lot of people, but from that wide receiver 13 to top 10 range, that's a pretty big jump in rankings. And I'm willing to make the leap on him this week. So 90% snaps in week 9. 10th most targets in the league at 72, 27% target share, 2nd in air yards with 1,062, number 1 in deep targets with 19, 8th in the league in receiving yards. My favorite, though, he gets the Steelers, and the Steelers are the worst against the wide receiver position in the NFL. They've allowed 1,700 yards and 10 touchdowns, which are the most in the league, touchdowns against them in the secondary. So loving Chris Olave this week. Excited to see what he does, and man, is he having a great rookie year.
It's exceeding expectations. You know, the thing about him, we knew he was such a precise route runner, and obviously, you know, he initially overshadowed Garrett Wilson, and then that kind of flipped towards the end there at Ohio State. But the one question was, can he actually leverage that 4.3 speed and get downfield? Because it wasn't something he did as often at Ohio State, and he's doing that too. You know, if Thomas was ever out there, which obviously he's not going to be out there for a while, I wouldn't be surprised if we don't see him the rest of the season. He just doesn't come off of injured reserve. Regardless, if he was out there, though, Olave gave you that. Now Olave's like, oh, you just need me to be the alpha? I'll do that too. Such an impressive year. And now the best part, even with Jarvis, Olave's kind of the only show in town and consistently producing, consistently seeing, you know, at or near double-digit targets. Just love it, man.
I do have one start-sit question that I want to ask you, because I have gotten this question wrong every single week except for one. And the question is here: Evan Ingram,
oh boy,
or Tunyon?
Who else is on waivers? That's usually my answer. It's like neither. Right now, I'll tell you how I have it right. I believe I have Evan Ingram ahead. I don't like either. Yeah, I have the 13 and 14. But once you get outside of maybe Freiermuth at 9,
it's a coin
maybe
flip.
Dalton Schultz, I guess, as well. Like Taysom Hill is always a roll of the dice, and we know that. But once you get outside of that, all those guys are really, really tightly packed. So Foster Moreau is close with those guys. Cole Kmet is close with those guys. And name Billy, who I think everybody should be keeping an eye on this week in terms of usage in that Germany game, is Noah Fant. The first time they finally use Noah Fant, he explodes in that game, right? He is so athletic. The run after catch ability is elite. They were just using too much of Will Dissly. And what we saw this past week is that finally, you know, went away. Will Dissly didn't run as many routes. It was more Noah Fant. Will Dissly was in there blocking, yes, but more Noah Fant. Keep an eye on that. Not to use him this week, but if they really unleash that with the way that Geno is playing, man, that could be fun. So I guess back to the original, Evan Ingram had 4 very good games, 1 down week that he was hurt in. He's practicing, so I'll go with Ingram. I don't love it, though.
Yeah, last week I was like, I am sure Evan Ingram is going to outproduce Tunyon, and of course he got hurt, back injury, ruined my plans. So I've given up. I've told Giselle, you can no longer ask me this question. It's just, if this question gets asked, I'm not answering it, because the one week I didn't answer it is the only week I had it right in my rankings too. So I'm not answering it moving forward. That's the last time. Well, Jeff, thanks for hopping on the show. I greatly appreciate you taking the time out of your day. Why don't you tell everyone where to find you and what you're working on?
You can find me, I guess, on the radio sometimes. So the very originally named the Jeff Ratcliffe Show on Sirius XM Fantasy Sports Radio. It's channel 87. That's from 9 to 11 Eastern in the mornings, Monday through Friday. On Sunday mornings, tune in on CBS Sports Network, 9 to noon this Sunday Eastern. For that other pregame show we do, you know, it's a regular NFL pregame show, but we also have fantasy and betting on the show, which I handle those for the show. So check that out. FTNfantasy.com. That's the other spot. And I guess if you want to follow me on Twitter so you can like yell at me and troll me, we'll take those follows as well. At Jeff Ratcliffe on Twitter. Not at Jeff Radcliffe, by the way. Leave that dude alone. Leave Jeff Radcliffe alone. It's Jeff Ratcliffe with the T.
Yeah. And so now you have the invitation to troll him. Just keep that in mind.
Just
everybody.
go for it. Hey, that's what Twitter was created for, right?
Yeah.
People are like, oh, Twitter's going downhill right now. I'm like, guys, where have you been for the last 8 years? Like, this thing has been off the rails for a long time.
We're already at the bottom of the first hill.
Pretty much.
Well, thanks for tuning in, everybody. I'll be back here tomorrow at midnight Eastern for our weekly start-sit show and answering all of your questions that you have for your lineups. Also going to be running through all the injury news for your final lineup decisions heading into Sunday night slate. Don't forget, we have the early Sunday morning matchup again over the pond. So wake your ass up and set your lineups. That's it, everybody. Have a good night, and we'll see you later tomorrow.